Hello and welcome to today's video, Fractions and Decimals, Part 1. First, let's go over some of today's key vocabulary that you will need to know and understand for today's lesson. Our first word is round. This means to approximate a number and make it easier to work with. Rounding up means to approximate larger than the actual value, while rounding down means to approximate smaller than the actual value. During this lesson today, you will hear a lot of round to the nearest blank. This means to round a number up or down in a particular decimal place, depending on which approximation is closer to the actual value. Now we are going to talk about how to write fractions as decimals. Let's start simple with the fraction 1/4. The first thing we want to do is see if we can figure out how to change the denominator, or the 4, to a number that is equal to either 10 or 100. We know right off the top of our heads that 4 does not go into 10 evenly, so that's not going to be possible. But 4 does go into 100 evenly. What do we have to do to 4 to make it equal to 100? Well, we're going to multiply it by 25. If I multiply it on the bottom, I have to multiply it on the top, which means that 1/4 is the same thing as 25 100ths. Now I can easily take this number and write it as a decimal. 25 100ths is equal to 0.25. The correct way to read this number is 0 and 25 hundredths, which is exactly what we have here in our fraction. Now let's look at another example, 3/5. 5 can go evenly into both 10 and 100, but we're going to try to make it easy on ourselves by choosing 10 as our new denominator. In order to turn 5 into 10, I need to multiply it by 2, and whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 3 times 2 is 6, and 5 times 2 is 10. In order to write this one as a decimal, we are simply going to write 0.6. The correct way to read this number is 0 and 6/10ths, which is exactly what we have over here in our fraction. Basically, all you have to do when turning a fraction into a decimal that has a denominator of 100 or 10 is take whatever number is on top, write a 0, add a decimal, and then add whatever number that is at the end of that decimal. Let's look at one more example. Let's look at this mixed number, 3 and 7/20ths. Because 20 is bigger than 10 and 7 is not divisible by 2, I know that I can't use the division rule to make this fraction into tenths. So instead, I am going to use the multiplication rule to make this fraction into 100ths. 3 is going to stay exactly the same because it's a whole number, and we do not need to change it in order to make this work. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So in order to make 20 into 100, I'm going to multiply it by 5, which means I'm also going to multiply the top by 5. 35 over 100 is my resulting fraction. In order to turn a mixed number into a decimal, I first have to write down my whole number, followed by a decimal. Then I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I did up top, here and here, and I'm simply going to take this number on top of the 100 and write it after the decimal. This number reads as 3 and 35 hundredths, which is exactly what this mixed number says right here. Now let's talk about rounding decimals. Rounding decimals is often used to present data in a form that makes the most sense for the situation. Decimals can be rounded to a particular place in one of 3 ways: always down, always up, or to the nearest selected place. Let's round all 3 of these decimals to the nearest whole number. 88 100ths rounds to 1 because 8 is bigger than 5. 1 and 47 hundredths is going to also round to 1. This is because the 4 is smaller than 5. 3 and 61 hundredths is going to round up to 4. This is because 6 is bigger than 5, which told the 3 to go up to the next digit. Here is your practice problem of the day. Write each of these 2 numbers as decimals. Don't forget to change the denominators to 10 or 100 if needed. Good luck!